Out of my kitchen, old man. Nobody asked you to be here. My son-in-law said that to me, in my own house, at my own Thanksgiving table, in front of my grandchildren. He'd forgotten, apparently, whose name was on the deed. I set down the dish I was carrying, looked at him for a long moment, and walked to the hallway closet where I'd been keeping a folder for the past 4 months. That folder changed everything. Let me back up. My name is Douglas, and I've lived at 14 Birchwood Crescent in Kitchener, Ontario for 29 years. I bought the house in 1995 with my wife, Carol. We raised 2 kids here. Carol passed in 2019, and I stayed because this house is full of her. The garden she planted along the back fence still blooms every June. Her handwriting is still on a label inside the linen closet. You don't leave a place like that. My daughter, Vanessa, called me in February 2022. I remember the date because there was a freezing rain warning, and I was listening to it on the kitchen radio when my phone lit up. Dad, we're in trouble. Tyler's company went under. We have nowhere to go, just for a few weeks while we find our footing. I told her to come home. They arrived on a Saturday with a minivan packed to the roof. Tyler, my son-in-law, shook my hand at the door with both of his, the way a man does when he's desperate and knows it. Vanessa hugged me in the hallway and cried into my shoulder. My 2 grandchildren, Owen, who was 11, and Lily, who was 8, stood on the front step with their backpacks looking confused about what was happening to their lives. I fed them all dinner that first night. Chicken pot pie, Carol's recipe. Tyler had 2 helpings and said nothing about the food or the house or me. Within a month, the dynamic shifted in ways I kept telling myself were small. Tyler started referring to the living room as our space when he was on phone calls. I heard him once, standing in the hallway outside the den. Yeah, we have a pretty good setup here. Good-sized place, comfortable. He made it sound like he'd chosen it. I went back to the kitchen and told myself it was nothing. Month 3, he rearranged the furniture in the basement without asking. Said the layout made more sense for his home office. I'd had a chair down there that Carol and I bought at a market in Stratford in 2003. He'd moved it to the furnace room. I brought the chair upstairs and said nothing. Vanessa was working as much as she could. She'd picked up a bookkeeping contract, but most of the household costs were mine. Utilities, groceries, internet, the property tax that came due in June. I kept a ledger out of habit, the same way I kept records for 32 years as a licensed insurance broker. I wrote down every dollar, not because I planned to use it, just because that's who I am. By month 8, the thanks had mostly stopped. In the beginning, Vanessa would say it every few days. Thank you, Dad. We know this isn't easy. We'll be out of your hair soon. But soon kept moving. And Tyler never said it at all after the first week. Small things accumulated the way snow does, slowly, then all at once. I was told the TV was too loud after 9 o'clock. I was asked not to use the good parking spot in front of the garage because Tyler needed to pull out quickly in the mornings. I came downstairs one Sunday and found that someone had thrown out the ceramic fruit bowl Carol had painted in a class she took the year she was sick. It was chipped, but it was hers. When I asked Vanessa about it, she looked at the floor and said, Tyler thought it was clutter. I went out to the recycling bin and got it back, washed it off and put it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, where it sits to this day. By the time the second winter came, I had stopped eating dinner in the dining room. Not because I was told to, not exactly, but Tyler would set up his laptop at the table and take calls, and there was always the feeling that I was in the way. I ate at the kitchen island instead, my own house, and I was eating alone in the kitchen like I was boarding somewhere. My grandson Owen noticed. He started coming to sit with me sometimes, dragging a stool over and eating beside me without saying why. He was 12 by then. Kids understand more than we give them credit for. It was Owen who warned me about Thanksgiving. He came to find me in the garage on the Saturday afternoon in late October, where I was going through some of Carol's old gardening things. Grandpa, Mom and Dad are inviting a lot of people. Dad says you should maybe eat early so there's room at the table. He said it the way kids say things they've been asked to relay, carefully, watching my face for the reaction. I thanked him and told him not to worry about it. After he went back inside, I stood in the garage for a while with a pair of Carol's garden gloves in my hands, and I made a decision. I called my old friend Albert. We'd known each other since our boys played hockey together in the 90s. He was a retired family lawyer, sharp as ever, the kind of man who listens completely before he speaks. I told him what had been happening. He came over the next afternoon and we sat at the kitchen table, the one I bought in 1997, carried through that door myself, and I laid out everything. "What you're describing is a pattern," Albert said, stirring his coffee. "They've been here almost 2 years. In Ontario, that creates complications if they ever decided to make a formal claim." I slid my ledger across the table. He spent 10 minutes going through it, looked up at me over his glasses. "You've been tracking everything." "I was in insurance for 32 years, I said. "You write things down." He smiled a little. "Get me copies of these. And Douglas, do not let this go past Thanksgiving." I spent the week before the holiday quietly preparing. I went to see Robert Canning, a property lawyer whose office was on King Street downtown, brought the ledger and a folder of bank statements and receipts. Robert was methodical and calm. He confirmed what Albert had told me, without a lease agreement, without any documentation of financial contribution on their part. They had no legal standing to remain if I chose to end the arrangement. The key, he said, was how I did it. "Do it clearly," he said. "Do it with witnesses if possible, and have everything documented before you do." I had everything documented. I'd had it documented for months. Thanksgiving that year, I was up before 6. I started the turkey, 18 pounds, brined overnight the way Carol always did it, and worked through the morning while the house was quiet. Cranberry relish from scratch, a sweet potato dish Lily liked, fresh bread because my grandchildren deserved a proper meal. Nobody came to help. Nobody came down to ask if I needed anything. Tyler appeared around 10, poured himself a coffee without saying good morning, and went back upstairs. Vanessa came down at noon and started rearranging plates, moved Carol's good china from the stack I'd set out and replaced it with the plain white dishes Tyler's mother had given them as a gift. I noticed. I said nothing. Guests arrived around 3. Tyler's brother, his wife. 2 couples from Tyler's old work. He met them at the door like he owned it. Come in, let me show you the place." He gave them a tour of my house. I heard him talking about the kitchen renovation he was planning. I was still in the kitchen when Tyler came in to move the serving dishes around. He didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge I was there until I reached past him to check the turkey. He stepped back and said it then, not loud, not a shout, just flat and cold, like he was talking to someone who worked for him. "Get out of my kitchen, old man. Nobody asked you to be here." The room went quiet. His brother was standing in the doorway and heard every word. I set down the basting spoon. I looked at Tyler for a long moment, long enough that his expression shifted, just slightly, from dismissal to something less certain. Then I walked to the hallway closet, opened it, and took out the folder. I came back to the kitchen. Tyler hadn't moved. I set the folder on the island and opened it. Turned it so he could see the front page. Deed of title, 14 Birchwood Crescent. My name. The date, 1995. I said, "I want you and anyone in this house who doesn't live here as the legal owner to please gather your things. You have until this evening to leave." Tyler laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on. It's Thanksgiving." "It is," I said, "which is why I'm giving you the whole evening rather than calling the Waterloo Regional Police right now." The laugh stopped. Vanessa appeared from the dining room. She'd heard. Her face was white. "Dad." "What are you doing?" "This isn't... Dad." I looked at my daughter. "Vanessa, I've let this go for almost 2 years. I've tracked every dollar I've spent keeping this household running while the 2 of you contributed nothing. I have a lawyer who has reviewed everything. You are welcome to contest that. But tonight, I need you to leave." Tyler's brother touched his wife's arm. They were already moving toward their coats. Tyler dropped the performance. His voice got low and hard. "You do this on Thanksgiving, to your own family. You called me old man. In my own kitchen," I said. "You told me to get out. I'm taking your advice." He started toward me. I picked up my phone. The movement was small and unhurried. He stopped. The guests were gone within 15 minutes. Tyler's brother paused on the way out, nodded at me. A small acknowledgement, nothing more, and left without speaking to Tyler again. Vanessa packed 2 bags. She was crying. She kept stopping and then starting again. "Dad, where are we supposed to go? It's Thanksgiving night." I told her what I'd already arranged. I had called the Extended Stay Comfort Inn on Homer Watson Boulevard and paid for 1 week with my own card. The booking confirmation was in the folder. I slid it across the counter to her. She stared at it. "I love you," I said, "but I should have said this 18 months ago. You and Tyler are adults. It's time to act like it." Owen stood at the bottom of the stairs with his backpack. He didn't look at either of his parents. He looked at me, and what I saw in his face. 12 years old and already exhausted by the people he lived with. That was the part that hurt most. Not Tyler's words, not Vanessa's tears. That look on Owen's face. I squeezed his shoulder on the way out and told him to call me whenever he wanted. He nodded once. They left at 8:14. I know because I wrote it in the ledger. I changed all 3 exterior locks the next morning. A locksmith from Cambridge came out first thing. He was matter-of-fact about it, the way tradespeople are when they've seen this kind of situation before. Done in 40 minutes, new keys, only mine. Robert Canning called that afternoon. "Everything in order? Everything in order?" I said. He advised me to file a formal notice of termination of informal accommodation arrangement, a document that established, in plain language, that no tenancy had existed and that the departure had been completed. He filed it the same week. It wasn't necessary, he said, but it was clean. I liked clean. I sat at the kitchen table that evening with a cup of tea and the ceramic fruit bowl Carol had painted on the windowsill, and the house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in almost 2 years. Not peaceful quiet. Just empty quiet. There's a difference, and at first it's hard to tell them apart. Vanessa called 4 times in the first 3 days. I let the calls go to voicemail and listened to them once each. The first 2 were upset, confused. The third was angry. I could hear Tyler in the background. The 4th was just her voice, tired, saying, "I don't know what to do, Dad." I called her back after the 4th message. "Where are you staying?" I asked. They'd moved from the hotel to a 2-bedroom rental in Cambridge. Her voice was flat when she told me. $18.50 a month each, plus utilities. Tyler had found part-time work at a building supply store. She was still doing her bookkeeping contract. "That's a start," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "You had that folder ready. How long had you been planning this?" "Since Owen told me I was being asked to eat early so there'd be room at the table." Another silence. I said, "Vanessa, I kept records of everything. 62 months of groceries, utilities, insurance contributions, property tax I paid alone. The total is just under $84,000. I have a lawyer. I'm filing a civil claim." I expected anger. What I got was quiet. And then, very small, "I know." That's all she said. "I know." I filed the claim in November. Robert Canning handled it efficiently. Ontario Superior Court, Waterloo Region. Tyler, predictably, did not take it quietly. He hired a paralegal, I learned this through Robert, and sent a letter claiming he and Vanessa were entitled to compensation for improvements and contributions to the household. Robert read me the letter over the phone and then said, without editorializing, "The improvements they're citing appear to be a shelf Tyler installed in the laundry room and repainting a bedroom without permission." "Right," I said. "This won't go well for them." "I know," I said. The hearing was scheduled for January at the courthouse on Frederick Street, downtown. I'd been there before, years ago, for something minor related to the business. It's an old building with long hallways and the particular smell of government carpet and fluorescent lighting. Albert came with me as a friend, not as my lawyer. Robert was already inside. Tyler and Vanessa arrived with their paralegal, a young woman who looked overwhelmed by her briefcase. Tyler wore a jacket that didn't fit properly. Vanessa looked like she hadn't been sleeping. I noticed she'd lost weight. The presiding judge was a methodical man in his 60s named Justice Carmichael. He reviewed the documentation for several minutes before speaking. He asked Tyler's paralegal to explain the basis for the counterclaim. She cited contribution to household maintenance and emotional distress. Justice Carmichael asked for documentation. She had Tyler's account of the shelf installation and a receipt for the paint. The judge looked at the receipt. "This is from Home Hardware. $47. "Yes, Your Honor." He set it down and looked at Robert's submission, bank statements, utility records, the ledger, Carol's canceled checks, Vanessa's own emails, including one from March 2023 that said, "Thanks for keeping the lights on, Dad," literally. The hearing was over in 22 minutes. Judgment for the plaintiff. $84,230, payment schedule to be determined based on means. Tyler said something under his breath as we filed out. I didn't hear the words clearly, and I didn't ask. In the hallway, Vanessa came to find me before I reached the elevator. She waited until Tyler had gone ahead, then touched my arm. I turned around. She looked at me for a long moment. I want to say something, and I don't want to say it with Tyler standing there. I waited. "I should have spoken up a long time ago," she said. "Every time he was rude to you. Every time I saw you eating alone in that kitchen, I told myself it was easier not to make things worse, but I was just being a coward." I looked at my daughter. She had Carol's eyes, in Carol's way of saying hard things plainly. "I know that," I said. "I'm going to pay you back. It'll take years, but I will, and I'm—" She stopped. She started again. "I'm thinking about a lot of things right now." I nodded. That's all I said. The payment order came through in February. A structured schedule. Tyler and Vanessa jointly liable, monthly contributions beginning in April. Robert had been honest with me, collecting the full amount would take years and depended on their circumstances, but the judgment existed. It was on record. That mattered. Owen called me the first Saturday of March. He'd gotten my number from Vanessa, he said, and asked if he could come for a visit. I said, of course. I said, come for lunch. He showed up at noon on his bicycle, even though it was still cold enough to see your breath. He locked the bike to the porch railing, something he'd always done since he was small, and came inside and sat at the kitchen island the same way he used to, on the stool he dragged over during those months when he kept me company at dinner. He didn't say much for a while. We ate grilled cheese sandwiches and I told him about the garden plan for spring. Then he said, out of nowhere, I told Lily what happened. Like, the real version. She was upset at first, but then she said it made sense. I asked what made sense. He thought about it, that you didn't just let it keep happening. We ate without talking for a bit. He looked around the kitchen, at the dish rack, the kettle, the fruit bowl on the windowsill, the particular way a person looks at a place they missed without knowing they were missing it. Grandpa, can I come for visits? Like, regularly? I told him that as long as I was standing, this door was open. He nodded and ate the rest of his sandwich. Vanessa called in April, the day after the first payment came through. She said Tyler had moved out. No drama in her voice. Just the flat particular exhaustion of someone who'd made a hard decision and survived it. She said she was looking for a bigger bookkeeping contract. She said Owen had asked if he could have the room they used to keep as an office. She was renting a 2-bedroom now on her own, and she'd said yes. I'm figuring things out, she said. Good, I said. That's all anyone can do. There was a pause. She said, I drove past the house last week, just to drive past it. The garden's already starting to come in along the back fence. It does that every year, I said. I know, she said. I just didn't know if I'd ever see it again. Albert came over that Thursday for chess, the way he does most weeks now. We played on the back deck because the weather had finally turned. Real spring warmth for the first time since October. He won the first game. I won the second. He refilled his coffee cup and looked at the garden. You did the right thing, he said, but I want to ask you something. Go ahead. Do you think it was worth it? I thought about that. About Owen on the stool at the kitchen island. About the fruit bowl Carol painted that I carried back from the recycling bin. About the night Vanessa said I know in a voice that was nothing but honest. I think I did what I should have done sooner, I said, and I think there's a chance, not a certainty, but a chance that Vanessa comes out of this a different person than she was going in. Albert moved his bishop, and Tyler, I moved my rook. Tyler will be Tyler. That's his problem now. Albert nodded and studied the board. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, For someone who claims he just keeps records, you play a pretty careful game. I looked at the garden along the back fence. Carol's peonies just starting to push up through the mud. 32 years in insurance, I said. You learn to think about what happens next. I still think about that fruit bowl sometimes. The one Carol painted in the ceramics class she took when she was sick, chipped on one side, nothing special to look at. Tyler put it in the recycling bin because he thought it was clutter. I went out and got it back, washed it off, and put it on the windowsill where it still sits. I didn't say a word to anyone about it. But I wrote the date in my ledger that evening, and something settled in me that I didn't fully understand until much later. What I understand now is that actions accumulate. Tyler didn't become the man who told me to get out of my own kitchen in one afternoon. He became that man slowly, over months, through 100 small moments where nobody stopped him. And I have to be honest with myself about my own part in that. Every time I moved to the kitchen island to eat alone rather than say something, I was teaching him that the behavior was acceptable. Every time I swallowed the words I should have spoken, I was lending him a confidence he hadn't earned. That's not kindness. That's abdication. There's a version of integrity that looks quiet from the outside but requires more from you than anger ever does. It meant keeping records when it would have been easier not to. It meant calling Albert and Robert and sitting at that kitchen table with a folder of documents before I said a single word to Tyler or Vanessa. It meant thinking carefully about what I was doing and why, and making sure that when I finally acted, I could stand behind every step. That kind of patience isn't passive. It's the hardest thing I've ever practiced. And then there's what it took to actually do it. To stand in my own hallway on Thanksgiving evening and tell my daughter, to leave. To hear Owen go quiet at the bottom of the stairs and know that I was the one disrupting his night, even though I wasn't the one who'd caused any of it. There were a dozen moments in those hours when I could have found a reason to pull back, to say, not tonight, to put the folder away and eat cold turkey alone in the kitchen and tell myself that keeping the peace was the same thing as keeping the family together. But I'd spent 32 years in insurance watching people defer the hard conversation until it became a catastrophe. I knew what deferred problems look like when they finally arrive. What I didn't expect was Vanessa, not the anger in the first voicemails. I expected that. I mean the fourth message, the tired one. And then later I know, said in that flat, honest voice. That was the sound of someone starting to look at themselves clearly, and it was more important to me than winning any court judgment. The $84,000 matters. The payment schedule matters. Accountability has to mean something real, or it means nothing at all. But Vanessa sitting across from me in that courthouse hallway, saying what she said without Tyler standing beside her, that told me something about who she might become if she had the chance to figure it out on her own terms. Owen still comes on Saturdays sometimes. He lops his bike to the porch railing and sits at the kitchen island, and we don't talk about any of it. We just eat lunch, and I tell him about the garden. That's enough for now. Maybe that's the real measure of how something ends, not the judgment, not the changed locks, not even the apology. Just a kid on a stool, eating a grilled cheese sandwich in a house that finally feels like mine again.